Hello and welcome to the Essential Football Podcast. Great to have your company. In today's episode, we look back on another thrilling weekend of action in the Premier League with not one, but two sensational second home debuts from two of the most exciting players in the world. Cristiano Ronaldo lit up Old Trafford with 2 goals against Newcastle before Romelu Lukaku followed suit with a brace of his own at Stamford Bridge. I'm Alice Piper, and joining me to assess those dream homecomings, Mohamed Salah's entry into the 100 club, Arsenal's first win of the season, and much more, are Sky Sports football writer Ron Walker and digital football journalist Charlotte Marsh. Great to have you both on the podcast, guys. Hi.
Hello.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Great to have you. So, one place to start, and that is with that huge second debut from Ronaldo. He said after the game that he'd felt nervous for the match. I mean, firstly, I don't even know if you can really believe that, but secondly, he didn't let it show, did he, Charlotte?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I guess anyone would be nervous going and make your second debut for Man United, where he didn't start his career there, but it's where he made his name there. And there is excitement buzzing around Old Trafford. Ever since it was announced that he'd signed, you saw the queues outside of the Superstore, queuing up for their number 7 Ronaldo shirts, and there was a lot of buzz around his return. And he delivered, and more often than not, he does deliver for whichever team he's playing for. So even after Newcastle equalised, you kind of always felt that United had enough quality to win the game. Even with Ronaldo, they've done fairly well without him so far. But it's just that extra edge and that aura that he brings to any squad. You know, he is a proven winner. He's broken records upon records. And he's won it. He's won all the big trophies, and he just has that professionalism and confidence about him that I think would boost any side to victory. And he turned up when United did need the goals. So you kind of thought that maybe the fairy tale was on, because his only Premier League hat-trick was against Newcastle in January 2008. So you thought, absolutely, he's going to score a hat-trick. It's going to be this fairy tale mirroring of history. And unfortunately, that didn't happen for him. But it was still 2 wonderful goals. And, he really proved why Man United wanted him back.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ole Gunnar Solskjaer said he's still as ruthless and as clinical as he was before. Would you agree with that, Ron, before he left?
Yeah, I certainly think so. I mean, you saw that in the manner of the 2 goals he scored. It was a bit of a mistake from Freddie Woodman for the first, but you can see when he spills that initial shot, Ronaldo's there. It's almost like he's like a second ahead, like he's got a little sneak peek of what's about to happen. His awareness and his movement is just off the scale. And you almost think he's a bit like the Terminator. Like he's 36 years old and he was still outpacing defenders for that second goal as well. And he got another slice of luck, but the amount of shots he takes for a start, but also his finishing, his movement, his general all-round play, he's got to be one of the most, if not, I mean, there's a separate debate whether he's the best in history, but he's probably the best 36-year-old in history, I would have thought.
Yeah, just a bit frightening, Charlotte, isn't it? 36 and doing what he's doing.
Yeah, completely. And I think Ron's right. His movement, his awareness, his sort of ability to help the team was incredible. And I think, a lot of players' careers end way before 36, and he's still going. And arguably, he's still up there among the best in the world. So it's scary how long you can think he can go on for. And in the match, he topped numbers for goals. Obviously, he scored twice. Expected goals, shots, fast breaks, touches in the opposition box. We have a really great data editor, Adam Smith, who looks all these things up. He's a friend of the show. Listen out for him on future podcasts. But the numbers speak for themselves. We can sit here and talk about how brilliant Ronaldo was, and he was brilliant. And the numbers back it up. And it's going to be really exciting to see what he does in the coming months.
Yeah, Ron, he said he wanted to show fans he's still capable of helping the team. But had that ever been in doubt, I mean?
Well, there were a few dissenting voices. I don't want to mention any names, but I think...
Go on.
I do love the Magic Man. Paul Merson is a fantastic pundit for Sky, but it was one of the few times I thought, I don't know if I think Ronaldo is a very different player from when he left United, but I don't think it was going to be quite like an Ibrahimovic, when he came in and still scored a lot of goals, but arguably weakened United in other ways. But yeah, Ronaldo, he was getting down the flanks, in fact, as well in the first half and scoring, creating. I don't think it could have gone any better than that on the day, though. I mean, as Charlotte said, maybe the hat trick, but apart from that, pretty much a dream debut.
different doesn't necessarily mean worse. You know, he is different. He is a lot older. He has a lot more experience now than when he played at Man United. And football is a game of opinions. It's a game of football. It's also a game of opinions. And the only way you're going to know whether he's good enough is his own performances on the pitch.
Yeah, and he's shown he is at the minute, isn't he? And in Merson's defence, he did say that his movement was phenomenal after the game. We'll give him that. Now, there have been some questions over whether Ronaldo and Bruno Fernandes could play together in the same team. They showed on Saturday, of course they can, why ever not? I mean, they played together for Portugal as well, Charlotte.
Yeah, it always seemed like a bit of a strange one to me. I think anyone who watches Portugal internationally, I don't know how many listeners of the podcast are international Portugal fans, but for us, with our work, we do get to watch Portugal on a semi-regular basis. And they play together for Portugal in most games. You know, I know Portugal and Man United are obviously two different teams and two different styles and things like that. But for me, it was never really a question of whether they could play together. They link up so well for their country. So, and again, we saw on Saturday that they can do exactly the same for their club. And Ole said after the game, he was asked by Sky that exact question. And he said, well, quality players can always play together. And I think that was proven right on Saturday. So for me, it was kind of a non-issue, really.
You talk about quality players. Fernandes wasn't to be outshone either, providing the goal of the game, Ron, hey?
Yeah, I mean, I worry for goalkeepers, really. You've got Ronaldo pouncing around in the 6-yard box on Saturday. You've got Fernandes banging them in from distance. I mean, no one gets any break, really, do they? Yeah, exactly. Fernandes, and they're not the same player. It's not like, you know, the Gerrard Lampard debate from the England era of about 15 years ago. This is two players who can both score from range, both score from inside the box, but Fernandes is going to sit deeper and Ronaldo is going to be there causing defenders nightmares all throughout the season, and woe betide anyone who has to come up against them at the moment.
No, absolutely. But Ronaldo's day, of course, the difference maker, I guess, wasn't he? How much did he raise United's attacking performance all round, Charlotte, would you say?
For me, United's attacking performance this season has been good. Mason Greenwood's looked really sharp. Obviously, Rashford's not in the squad at the moment. Fernandes has been brilliant always. Pogba's pulling those strings in midfield. So, for me, actually, the attack hasn't been too bad for United so far this season. It's actually, if anything, it's improved over the summer. But the thing with Ronaldo is he will always add quality to any club that he goes to. And like I said before, he just adds such a confidence to a team. Like, you see Ronaldo walking into the training ground, you're going to be like, okay, yeah, I'm up for this one. And I think Ole said that the night before the game, he gave a speech to the team at the team hotel. You're not going to make Ronaldo do an initiation song at this point in his career, are you really? So it's going to be a speech from the man himself. And if you're a player like a young player in the squad, like I said, mentioned Greenwood, even someone like Sancho who's been to Dortmund and come back, he's still a young player. You're going to look up to Ronaldo and he's going to give you that confidence, the belief. And he's such a professional. The way he trains, the way he looks after himself is second to none. And that's why he's been so successful. So that's also going to rub off on the squad. But going back to the attacking performance, like I say, he's always going to add quality. We've kind of mentioned that, you know, he was top in all these different categories on the day. So he scored both of his goals came from inside the 6-yard box as well. He had, you know, he was able to beat defenders. He was in the right place at the right time. As Merson said, his movement was phenomenal. So he absolutely brought something different to that attack. And like I say, it's going to be really exciting. I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does in midweek in the Champions League and going forward and in the Premier League as well.
Yeah, me too. And I saw a story that I loved is that apparently, I don't know whether it's true or not, but apparently no Manchester United player wanted to have a dessert on Friday night in the team hotel because they all saw what Ronaldo had been eating, you know, his quinoa and his vegetables and his fruit. You know, there's so many elements of him that's going to rub off on these players, hey, Ron?
Exactly. Do you remember when David Moyes came in and there was that, I think it was Moyes, when he came in and he took away the ketchup from the Manchester United training ground? And there was almost a mutiny. And then you compare that to Ronaldo leading by example and all the players going, oh, hang on, maybe we could take our diets a little bit further. So, yeah, it's chalk and cheese, that, isn't it? And it can only bode well. And As Charlotte said, I think it's going to be a bit of a long-term thing how he, ironically considering his age, that how he improves their attacking performance all round, in that someone like Mason Greenwood, that first goal where he's anticipating the goalkeeper making a mistake before he's even made it, Greenwood's going to watch that and be like, oh yeah, I could do that. And, you know, he's good enough to do it. It's just those sort of moments that not everyone thinks of. And yeah, I mean, Greenwood's the long term, isn't he? So if he's got that in his locker and just benefits from working with a player with the quality and the experience of Ronaldo, then United are only going to be the richer for it.
Yeah, so exciting for players like Greenwood, as you say. And what does his arrival mean, though, for United's title contending prospects this season, Charlotte?
Oh, I hate answering these questions because it's so early in the season. We've only played 4 games.
Sorry.
I mean, if you look at them in the 4 games so far, it's looking good, isn't it? I mean, it's been so long since United were challenging for a title. I know they were second a few years ago under Mourinho when City won the title, but they didn't really get that close, I guess, from memory. City just kind of blew everyone out of the water, whereas this year I think it's a lot more even. I think there's 4 teams for me that are going to battle for the title. United are up there, City, Liverpool and Chelsea. And it's so exciting. And I think, like I said, we've talked about obviously Ronaldo boosting this team a lot, but he is, like I say, we've said it before, he's a proven winner. And he's going to bring that mentality. He said after the game, he wants to win games and he wants to win titles and get Man United back to where they need to be. So I definitely think they're going to be up there, but don't ask me to predict a winner.
I think it's going to be a bit of a attack against defence for United this season, because they almost went, no, we're not going to get a defensive midfielder in, we're going to spend that money on Ronaldo. And you can totally understand, especially after Saturday, why they did that. But then you look at that Newcastle performance and they caught United out on the break so many times. And there was just, I think if they had someone shielding the back 4, because I mean Maguire and Varane have the obvious quality, but they are lacking a little bit at the back, I think. And you saw that in the Wolves game as well. They were quite fortunate that Wolves could have played until Christmas and still not scored, because otherwise I think they would have had a tougher time in terms of results so far. And also Newcastle, you know, if you're going to be playing on the break, you want Callum Wilson to be fit, and they were missing him. Joel Linton offers something, but he's not the world's best goal scorer. So yeah, I think it's really a question of whether that world-class attack can make up for the shortcomings further back.
Was the outcome quite harsh on Newcastle there? You say, you know, they did have some chances. They did look to exploit United's weaknesses. I mean, they held off well, didn't they, up in the first half? It took until the stroke of half-time for Ronaldo to find that opener. You know, Steve Bruce at the minute coming under quite a lot of pressure. What will this do for how fans are rating him at the minute, Charlotte?
Not much. Newcastle fans have never been backwards in coming forwards. They're quite vocal about their club and in support and in criticism. I've spoken to Steve Bruce before. I find him a very nice chap, but the fact of the matter is Newcastle fans don't like him. They don't like the squad. They don't like, even though for me the performance on Saturday I thought was good, and like you said, at the end of the day United just had that bit more quality in their locker to get themselves over the line. But 4-1 was a harsh scoreline on Newcastle. Like you say, they hit Man United on the break, which was always going to be the game plan, to kind of sit back and play on the break. And for me, I think Miguel Almiron played one of his best games for Newcastle. Admittedly, I don't watch Newcastle every week, so I can't comment on games that I haven't seen. But for the games that I have seen of him, he played really well. And Alan St-Maximin is always quality for Newcastle. He's one of their best players. And they were both involved in the goal. Really lovely goal, really great finish from Javier Manquillo. But at the end of the day, it is another defeat, and there were chances missed and there were defensive mistakes, which is a big thing for Newcastle, is making errors at the back. Freddie Woodman should have done better. Defenders were getting beaten too easily by United, and again, that's just the quality that the United have. But, I mean, in terms of the fans and Steve Bruce, it's not going to do much good, so to speak. I don't think they don't like him. Bruce Out was trending on Twitter not long after full time. So it's just the same sort of story for Newcastle and the fans and Bruce and how they feel about the performances. But I definitely think if you look closer there, from a neutral perspective as well, there are positives to take.
Yeah, positives to take. But as you say, Charlotte, another defeat for them. They've now conceded 12 goals in the first 4 games, lost 3 of those games. Ron, how must their fans be feeling right now?
I don't know if I can put it into words. This might sound a bit strange, but I think the only way that Steve Bruce is going to leave Newcastle is if there is a genuine danger of them getting relegated. And part of me thinks, given the Newcastle fans might look at that as the lesser of two evils in some ways, in that the approval of Bruce is so low on Tyneside that if they get someone else in, then maybe things will be better. But then you've got to also be sort of careful what you wish for, because as long as Mike Ashley's at the club, I don't think they are going to get the sort of managers and the sort of signings that they want. So I think we could be stuck in this Groundhog Day for a while. So yeah, they're probably just feeling like a big sense of deja vu as much as anything else.
And I think looking at the performance against United, if they can produce that against a side who maybe don't have the quality of United, so those ones that are going to be around them in the table, your Burnleys and Norwich and Villa, if they play like they did against United, then hopefully Newcastle will pick up wins against the teams that I guess you say they should do, for want of a better phrase. So I don't see them being in too much danger of relegation. That one might come back to bite me, but like Ron says, if that's the only way that Bruce is going to get sort of forced out, so to speak, then they might be waiting a little while.
Time will tell indeed. So from the second from bottom side to perhaps title contenders, Chelsea is coming up next. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Essential Football Podcast. Now time to turn our attention to title-chasing Chelsea and a relieved Arsenal, who finally have their first goal and win of the season. But first to Chelsea, another win for them, another clean sheet, thanks to a number of smart saves from Edouard Mendy in their goal. Looking the real deal now then, Ron?
Yeah, I saw them on the first day of the season at Palace, and they were absolutely sensational that day. They rode their luck a bit on Saturday, but there's going to be games where you have to do that, and I think then coming out of it with a 3-0 win is a pretty good outcome from that. And, well, it was the Lukaku show, wasn't it?
It was.
I think any team finishing above Chelsea this season is going to be near enough winning the league, because they're so strong defensively. Normally, I think Saturday was a bit of an anomaly, but it also shows what they've got at the other end of the pitch, and just highlighted the next level that they've gone to this summer. And yeah, I can't really speak highly enough of them. As I said, Saturday, not great, but if you still get the job done, that is, to use a tired cliche, the sign of a winning team.
Yeah, and they and Lukaku were so clinical, weren't they? And Graham Souness, he was very impressed with Lukaku as well. He called him the complete striker after the game. Charlotte, to you, is he that final piece of the puzzle they were missing perhaps last season?
Yeah, I think so. I think, last year Chelsea did really well, obviously. Won the Champions League. That's not a bad end to the season. But they didn't really have a striker they could rely on, like Abraham. Didn't really play that much. Giroud, again, wasn't particularly in the team particularly regularly, even though I remember the season before in the Europa League, he was great in the Europa League for them. But obviously didn't play too much last season and then left this summer. And Timo Werner hasn't quite found the grounding in the Premier League that Chelsea A would have hoped for and B paid the money for. And they were lacking that kind of Lukaku presence up front. And it's been really interesting reading all the interviews that he's done since he came back. He did a really good interview with Jeff Shreves before his first game against Arsenal. And it sounds like he was really sort of in a bit of a quagmire at Man United. He wasn't playing. And when he did play, he wasn't doing particularly well. And moving to Inter was the best thing for him, and his development over the last few years has simply been astounding. He's added extra elements to his game. In the interview with Jeff Shreves, he said that he's really worked on playing with his back to goal, and he said he didn't like doing that. But when he was in Italy, it's something that he worked on. And I remember when he played against Arsenal, and I think in the build-up to one of the goals, he did exactly that. He held the ball up with his back to goal with the defender behind him, turned, and then created the goal. So he's really sort of using those skills in the Premier League already, which is not a surprise because he knows exactly what the Premier League's all about. He's a lot fitter now as well. He looks a lot fitter on the pitch, and also sort of in sort of stature terms, and he really seems to have overhauled that training program that he's got. And I think I read somewhere that he's employed a nutritionist, and all sorts of things like that you would kind of expect from an elite footballer now. So he just seems to be really at peace with himself as a player, with himself as a player, with himself as a person. He's a dad now, he's got more responsibility, and all of these things kind of add up to being an incredible player. And like Ron said on Saturday, it was the Lukaku show, and I expect that to be the same for a lot of the season. And he is that impetus that Chelsea need to hopefully win multiple trophies this season.
Yeah, no, it completely was. As you say, the Lukaku show. I was there at Stamford Bridge. A brilliant movement for his first goal, a wonderful strike for his second. For you, Ron, then, was centre forward a weakness that they needed to address as well before Lukaku's arrival?
Yeah, absolutely. It was the only thing they really were lacking, and they've gone out and they've bought the perfect player for them. I mean, it's nice, simple transfer business for Chelsea this summer, but they absolutely nailed it. Last season, I think they kept clean sheets in more often than not after Tuchel came in, and the defence had been the issue obviously before when Lampard was there, but they were so lacking up front. And I think they were scoring only just over a goal a game under Tuchel, and that was it was such a glaring absence. And I think there's only so long that you can hope that Timo Werner is going to look like the player that we saw at Leipzig. But Lukaku, just to add on to what Charlotte said, that second goal especially, I remember at Man United he used to get a really bad rap for his first touch, and he trapped it like a bag of cement, one touch out of his feet, bang, top corner from 20 yards. Like, I don't want to say he's going to ever look like a bargain, but he certainly looks value for money already, doesn't he? He's just so good, and it is the final piece of the puzzle, it feels like, for Chelsea, because Tuchel made them hard to beat last season and then took them all the way to the Champions League. And now with goals in that team, and you don't tend to win the league unless you've got a decent defence, and now they've got the strike power, the firepower to match. It's going to be hard to stop.
Yeah, he's taken himself and his game to another level, and with it, I guess he's now taken Chelsea to another level. I loved it after the game, though, with Timo Werner. You've both mentioned him there. Lukaku gave him some praise and said actually he deserved a lot of credit for Lukaku's second goal, for the role he played in that. So it's nice for him to have some words of kindness from him as well, Charlotte.
Yeah, let's not be too harsh on Timo Werner, shall we? He's still a really good player, and he's starting for Chelsea as well. So it's not like Lukaku comes in, Werner's come out, that's it, he's done. No, he's still a really good player, and he still, like I said, helps set up goals. He's got a lot of other qualities that he brings to Chelsea, and it's interesting to note that both of them thrived in Italy and in Germany, so away from Chelsea, when they were part of a strike partnership. So Werner did really well at Leipzig when he was part of a strike partnership. At Inter, Lukaku had Lautaro Martinez up front with him. So I think Lukaku and both of them could do well on their own. Lukaku would probably do well on his own as well. Werner, we saw last year, didn't adapt to it quite so well. But together, they can really sort of create something incredible for Chelsea up front. We've already seen that while Lukaku may be taking the headlines, not just because he's scoring goals, obviously with his history with the Premier League, Werner is a big part of that. So credit has to go to him as well.
A scary proposition perhaps then for many Premier League sides. But from West London, let's now turn our attentions to North London. Arsenal, of course, finally up and running. That 1-0 win against Norwich. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang with the goal. Obviously a narrow win there, but a good place to start, hey Ron? Yeah,
you think on Saturday morning, Mikel Arteta would have just taken 3 points, doesn't matter how it happens or if it goes in off someone's backside, which to be fair it nearly did off of Aubameyang. But you've just got to end this talk of Arsenal's worst start in, I think it's more than half a century, and being bottom of the table and no points, no goals. At least we can stop talking about that now from his perspective. It wasn't particularly pretty, but I think that was almost inevitable because the confidence around the club must be at rock bottom. So just job done, get the win, get the goal, and then move on and hope that they can start building from here and use this as a platform.
Yeah, as you say, the confidence must have been pretty low. Obviously, it's going to be climbing a little bit at least after that win. Interestingly, though, after the game, Arteta said it had been his best fortnight of his career. Can he have been being serious, Charlotte? I mean, really?
I think when you sort of read the quotes in full, you take the snapshot of it and you look at it, and it is a bit peculiar. But you read the quotes in full when he mentions that over the last fortnight about how the club has come together. So with the players, the staff, the hierarchy at the club. I mean, like Ron said, they really were literally rock bottom. There was no goals. There was no wins. There was no points. So, I mean, the only way was up, really. And I think it's kind of a life lesson, I guess, that when you are in moments of need or when you have problems, you really do learn who is there for you. And I think that's what he is saying, and what he means is that the whole club has come together, worked together to try and work through these problems that Arsenal have. And if that's how he feels, and if that's true, then that's great for Arsenal, because then it means that everyone is pulling in the same direction and everyone is trying to push the team to do better, to get the win. And it worked because they won at the weekend. So I think that's what he was trying to say, rather than it kind of being the best fortnight in terms of, success, I guess. It's everyone pulling together. And if that's what has happened, then that is good news for Arsenal.
Yeah, and I guess you see sort of the strength in characters when things are rock bottom, hey Ron?
Yeah, and to be fair to Arsenal, it was a pretty intense attacking performance on Saturday. I think they had the most shots they'd had in years. I know they only scored the one goal, but, as we said before, you take what you can get. And, I think even against the Norwich side that had just as difficult a start to the season as Arsenal, the expectation was all on Arsenal and the confidence was so low that you do need to dig out a bit of character to, when the goal doesn't come early and, they got to the hour mark and it was still 0-0, they got it over the line, and that does take character. That does take a bit of digging deep, and they haven't shown that enough. So I think Arteta will take as much from keeping going and the perseverance and getting over the line as the result itself.
Yeah, and of course Arteta would have been happy to have had a number of first-team players at his disposal for that game. He also handed a debut to Aaron Ramsdale in goal. I mean, after the game, he was asked about that change, and he said, "We have two fantastic goalkeepers. We never forgot what Bernard has done for us and what a good goalkeeper he is. I had to make decisions. I felt Aaron was the right one." What does this say about Leno's future then, Ron?
Well, it's certainly thinking for the long term with Ramsdale, isn't it? Because he's already trying to include him and not giving Leno the free rein of being number one. And it's been fairly widely speculated about that Leno doesn't look like he's going to sign a new contract at Arsenal. He's entering the last 2 years of his deal, and we've seen so many times at the Emirates in recent years players getting into the last 12 months of their contract. I think Arsenal would be very happy if they could avoid a player running down their deal again. So I think it was a bit of a win-win for Arteta, because Norwich had one shot on target. It was unlikely to be peppering of Ramsdale's goal on his debut, and managed to get him some minutes. Leno sits it out. I'm sure he'll be back in the next few weeks. But as diplomacy goes, it wasn't the hardest of moves for Arteta, and if Leno does want to leave anyway, then I think it's not going to change much on that, at least.
I think it's interesting to note with goalkeepers as well. I think we're kind of, for some of the bigger clubs, so to speak, we are seeing a move away from the nailed on number one. You look at United and there's De Gea and Henderson. You go to Chelsea, obviously Mendy is most likely the number one, but then Kepa's on the, sort of in the background. And then now at Arsenal, you've got Ramsdale and Leno, who are both competing for that number one place. I think somewhere like City and Liverpool and Tottenham, you know who the number one's going to be. But it's just interesting to note that, at other clubs, it's not always a nailed on number one spot now. So it's interesting to watch.
Yeah, it's the strength in depth, particularly in the Premier League, because I guess the number two is just one injury or whatever away from becoming that number one for however long that might be. So Interesting what you say there, Charlotte. As for defence, Ben White and Gabriel were partnered at centre-half for the first time together. Did they look assured to you, Ron?
Yeah, I think they'll have sterner tests, but Arsenal have had their fair share of defensive mix-ups this season, let alone the last few years. So I think down the line, hopefully that'll look like a strong partnership. And Gabriel played pretty well. He had an up and down first season at the Emirates, and I think there's definitely a basis for a partnership there. They've got age on their side. White's a superb ball player, and he's got Premier League experiences now under his belt too. It's very early days, but the two good players, and I don't see why they shouldn't be able to work together.
Very early days, as you say, and very early days in the season as well. Finally, from this game, Charlotte, a word from you on Norwich. A really tricky start to the season, of course, bottom of the league. Liverpool, Man City, Leicester and Arsenal were their first four fixtures. Up next, though, it's Watford, Everton, Burnley and Brighton. And actually, I've spoken to a few Norwich fans who were at the Emirates at the weekend, and they were quite happy with the overall performance from Norwich. The goal was quite contentious as well, the winning goal. So positives to take from them now moving into this next round of fixtures, I guess.
Yeah, any team is going to struggle with that start. You look at Arsenal, and they played City and Chelsea in their first three games, and they lost both of those games too. So yeah, it's a tough welcome back for Norwich. They must have looked at that fixture list and just thought, okay, this is not going to be the start that we would want. But like you say, the next four fixtures are really where they need to start picking up points. Maybe against Everton it might be a bit tricky. Brighton have done really well at the start of this season, but definitely against the likes of Watford and Burnley, they should be picking up points. And it's a testament that they faced 30 shots from Arsenal at the weekend and they only conceded one. Conceding one means they lose the game, and that's just how football goes. But to face 30 shots and only let one in is a testament to the defence at Norwich.
Yeah, and Tim Krul made some really good saves in that defeat as well. Next up, guys, we'll be talking Liverpool and Mohamed Salah. Now we move on to Liverpool, a third clean sheet from four for them, a second 3-0 win as well. Of course, the result marred by that serious-looking injury to young Harvey Elliott. We'll come on to that in a moment, guys. But firstly, from what you've seen so far, are they back to being title contenders, Charlotte?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, completely. And I think it just shows you how much they missed those centre-backs last season, because obviously Van Dijk and Gomez were out for pretty much most of the season. And obviously Matic was in and out as well. So just gives them so much more confidence at the back, I think. I think having that, when you've got a back line, I think on Sunday it was Robertson, Alexander-Arnold, and then Matip and Van Dijk in the middle. When you've got players like that at the back, going forward, you don't particularly have to worry about defending, if that makes sense. I know sort of in some teams forward players get back and defend, and they do at Liverpool, but you don't have to necessarily worry about it as much as part of your game. So all respect to Nat Phillips and Ozan Kabak last season, because actually they didn't do a bad job at all, but they're just not as good yet. They're still really young as your Van Dijks, your Matips and your Gomez. It's so very much like Chelsea. They've only drawn, obviously, against Thomas Tuchel's side. And they probably would have been a bit frustrated with that draw, I think, having, been at home. Chelsea played an entire half with only 10 men. So that might be a little bit of a stickler. But as they say, if you can't win, don't lose. Brendan Rodgers says that a lot. So, yeah, it's very much back to their best for Liverpool, and like I said earlier, they're definitely going to be up there this season. Yeah,
looking very strong indeed. 9th win in a row as well, with Thiago and Fabinho starting together in midfield. That partnership, Ron, that's going to be key surely for Klopp this season.
Yeah, I think you're right. It took him a little while to get going in the Premier League, Thiago, but we've seen that from plenty of good players. I mean, Saul at Chelsea at the weekend had an absolute nightmare of a debut, and in time I'm sure he'll come good. But with Van Dijk and Matip, as Charlotte said, it just gives them a little bit more freedom to attack from midfield. And they just had Fabinho sitting a little bit more in the midfield, and then you can give, as it was on Sunday, Elliott, although not for the foreseeable, unfortunately, and Thiago a little bit more licence to join the front three. And I think it just the balance of the Liverpool team, not just from having the two centre-backs, for their pure defensive qualities, the way that Klopp can then build the rest of the team a little bit differently, not having to compensate, just gives them an extra edge as well. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, and I think, Thiago's going to play a big part of that. He won the ball back more in the middle third than anyone else on the pitch. Yesterday, I think he played the second most passes into the final third as well. So he had that proper, screening of the defence a little bit, but also getting him on the front foot. And at times, Liverpool have been a bit workmanlike in midfield, although, don't get me wrong, it's done them fantastically well. But Thiago, he's just got that little bit of quality, that little bit of class extra that I think will just add to them this season.
Yeah, he really has. The most tackles for him, the most ball recoveries as well. He had a brilliant game. And another guy who had a brilliant game and stole all the headlights was, of course, Mohamed Salah. He reached his 100 Premier League goals, and that was in the 5th fastest time ever. I mean, guys, his journey hasn't been all plain sailing, has it? You look at that spell at Chelsea, 13 Premier League appearances. He's then shipped off on loan to Fiorentina, then to Roma. A year later, though, returns to the Premier League. Big new beginning. First season at Liverpool, winning the Golden Boot, 32 goals. He hasn't, fair enough, quite hit those goal-scoring records since, but he has reached 20 in 2 of his last 3 other full seasons in the Premier League. And the speed in which he's done this, I mean, Leeds was his 162nd league appearance. It's pretty sensational, Charlotte, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's nothing short of incredible. And there seems to be a trend here with players who aren't quite getting along with the Premier League. Go to Italy. Seems to be the place to be, to, get yourself a grounding, come back and smash it out of the park. So
can't we all do that when work's going a bit down? Can't we all just go away for Italy for a bit? Enjoy the wine and the carbonara and come back? I'm
happily to move to Italy for a year, for the good of my career, so to speak. But for me, he's one of 3 players who, when we look back in however many years' time, will come to define this era of Klopp at Liverpool. So him, Van Dijk and Alisson, for me, are 3 of the players that really took this squad to another level. And I think that front 3 with Firmino and Mane will go down as one of the best attacking combinations that the Premier League has ever seen. At the moment, Firmino's not quite starting so much. Jota is in there as well, and he's doing it. It just speaks volumes for Liverpool that they have Firmino sitting on the bench and Jota starting, and both of them are performing well. So, but for me, he's been kind of the spearhead of that attacking partnership. I think he's the one who comes up with the goals, and like you say, takes the headlines. And obviously, assists and creating are just as important as the goals. But the goals are what win the game. So he's 29 now, so he's given his best years to Liverpool. And for me, I think he's really got a lot left in the tank. Can he go to 36 like Ronaldo? Who knows? But he's certainly showing this season that he seems to be back to his best. He's already scored 3 times. He's got 2 assists. So it's exciting times for Liverpool.
It is exciting times, as you say, at 29, far from finished yet. Ron, for you, how much influence has Salah had on this Klopp era at Liverpool then?
He's probably, I think I'd probably agree with Charlotte that those are the top 3, but I think he is the top 1, isn't he? He pretty much dragged them into the Champions League the first year he was there. They only just about qualified, and he got 32 goals in 38 games that season. And I don't think anyone could possibly have envisaged quite how well he would fare on his return to the Premier League. I mean, he did well at Roma, but nowhere near as well as he's done since he's been back. And yeah, I remember the second season after he'd won that Golden Boot. I think he got 19 or 20 goals, and people were saying, "Oh, he's not the same player." And that's a player that's almost getting 20 goals a season. That just shows how much of an influence he's had on not just Jurgen Klopp's side, but the Premier League in the 4 years that he's been back. And he's going to have to go down as one of the greats.
Yeah, and such high levels there, as you say, from him. So a great day on Sunday for Salah. We touched on it a little bit earlier. Really sad scenes from Harvey Elliott. Suspected dislocated ankle for him. Afterwards, I don't know if you've seen it, Jurgen Klopp's interview, he sounded and he looked really emotional talking about it. And it's just such a hard blow. 18 years of age. I actually spoke to Graham Souness last week for the podcast, and he admitted he'd been surprised by the rate of his impact. And he also said, if he can stay fit, he'll be so important this season. It's just absolutely gutting, isn't it, Charlotte?
Yeah, Harvey Elliott's been a player that I have kind of had my eye on since he made his debut at Fulham. And I was really excited for him to finally come into his own at Liverpool, because he's such a special player. Even at the age of 18, you can tell that he's going to be, playing for England before long. But it's just such a shame, and a dislocated ankle, that puts him out until at least the new year. I've never dislocated my ankle, and I'm not a doctor, so I don't know how long these things take to come back from. But it's definitely not going to be before the new year. And he was finally getting his chance. He was on loan at Blackburn last season, did really well there. So, yeah, it's really devastating to see that happen. But the good news is he's 18, so he still has years and years ahead of him, plenty of time to make his impact at Liverpool. But he was doing so well, and it's horrible when you see that happen to any player.
Yeah, and Klopp, of course, in shock, he said we'll play football without him, but we will wait for him as well, because he's just such a top player, Ron.
Yeah, he did so well at Blackburn last season, but I think Klopp doesn't do favours, does he? He's one of the. If he's giving you regular starts in big games, then you know that he can see a heck of a lot in you, and it's just so sad. There's never a good time for an injury like that. But I think, given that he was just on the cusp of breaking into the Liverpool team, 4 games into the season, and he would have, if he'd had a good first half of the season, we'd be talking about him for next year's World Cup, and maybe we still will, depending on how his injury recovery goes. But yeah, it's so sad, because you just wonder already what would have happened for him this season, because that's the one thing, this season it's not going to happen now.
Yeah, very sad indeed, and obviously wishing him as speedy as a recovery can be in the circumstances. Guys, we can't end before touching on Tottenham. It was a great start to the season. Was this defeat always kind of brewing, Charlotte?
Yeah, I think for me, Tottenham have been riding their luck a little bit with their victories sort of in the first 3 games of the season, especially their games against Wolves. And, Ron said it earlier, Wolves could have played all night and not scored. It was one of those games, but they certainly rode their luck a little bit. So this was always coming, but we do have to remember that there is a lot going on with the Tottenham squad at the moment, with the whole sort of dramatics around Argentina, Brazil, and they've had players that have been missing. Lo Celso and Romero have both been missing for them, and there's injuries, and there's a lot going on there. And I think it's interesting to note that Harry Kane, after everything that happened with him in the summer, he didn't have a shot or a touch in the opposition box for the first Premier League game in which he's played the full 90 minutes, the first time that's ever happened in the league for him. So it was a difficult afternoon at Selhurst Park, and for me, I think Palace were due a win, Tottenham were due a loss, and that's what's happened on Saturday.
Yeah, Ron, was it a case of Palace being brilliant or Tottenham just being woeful, I guess?
I think a bit of both, but so I think you could point to the fact that Tottenham played half an hour with 10 men, but at the same time, in the whole of the match, they managed a single shot on target. So that kind of speaks for itself, and I think you probably do have to look more at Tottenham than Palace, really, because Palace in the first 3 games of the season had 1 point, they'd scored 2 goals, and to be honest, in the game where they did get that point at West Ham, they only really turned up for about half an hour, whereas Tottenham, as Charlotte said, I feel like this has been coming. The first win against Man City was brilliant, but that was the kind of defensive performance that you do have to put in against a team with that sort of quality. But against Wolves, they really rode their luck. Watford, they narrowly beat. Watford have been a poor team so far this season. I just think there's something missing for Tottenham at the moment. And Nuno Santo, he wasn't. He didn't hide away from it after the full time when he said, they're really lacking creativity. But yeah, to give credit to Palace as well, they haven't looked like much of an attacking outfit yet, but they were really on the front foot. Zaha was sensational, and I think Edouard is probably nailed on for a start, and I'd be shocked if he doesn't start the next game, considering he got 2 goals from the bench, and he looked like a really good signing for the price when they brought him in on deadline day. And maybe Palace won't be in quite as much trouble as I think some of us thought in the early weeks of the season, because to be fair to them, it was a really, really strong performance.
Yeah, no, it was. And I guess, the other side of that, Tottenham fans would have taken 3 wins from their first 4 games if they'd have known at the beginning of the season, wouldn't they? So that there is always that as well. But interesting to see where they go from here. Finally, obviously, as I say, 4 games into the season, who has impressed you so far, Charlotte, as in player-wise?
Player-wise, for me, we've touched on Crystal Palace already, but it's Conor Gallagher. He's a player that I've followed for a while. He has been on loan at Charlton. He's been on loan at Swansea. And you he was on loan last season at West Brom in the Premier League as well. And it was a pretty poor season from West Brom. But Conor Gallagher was brilliant in every game that I watched. And I was at the game Crystal Palace played against Brentford. I think it was their second game of the season. And Conor Gallagher was absolutely superb. He was the best player on the pitch by a country mile. Off the top of my head, I think I may have given him my man of the match as well. So he was superb. And in that midfield, he can do everything. He was chucking himself into tackles. He was turning out of tight spaces. He was linking up well with Zaha. And then against West Ham, he was superb then as well. And he is such an incredible player. And I think, as ever with these young players, I'm not sure he has a huge future at Chelsea, especially if they keep buying these big money players. So I think a move to another team in the Premier League, maybe in January, maybe in the summer, would be best for him. But he continues to impress me every time I watch him. So I can't speak highly enough of him.
Ron, who would be yours?
Well, I would have said Conor Gallagher, but I don't want to point any fingers, but someone stole my idea. So I'm going to have to pull another one out of slightly more left field. I've covered West Ham a couple of times already this season, and Fornals, who I don't really think he's particularly impressed at all in the time that he's been in the Premier League so far. Not bad last season, but hit the ground running this time around. I think he's got 2 goals. That one of the ones against Leicester was excellent. And he could have had more. You could say Antonio and Ben Rama as well. That West Ham team have been excellent, and it's just a shame that Antonio got the red card on Saturday, which was a bit strange. But Fornals has been excellent, and it's good to see West Ham sort of picking up where they left off last season as well, and he's been a big part of that.
Sure, 2 very good picks. Mine would be Antonio there on. Guys, great to speak to you. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Have a brilliant week and look forward to catching up soon.
Cheers. Thanks, Alice.
Well, that's all from us on this episode of the Essential Football Podcast. You can subscribe to us directly. Just search the Essential Football Podcast on your provider and hit subscribe. But for now, thanks as ever for your company, and see you next time.